Well, greetings to everyone. It is a lovely Friday afternoon on our side. And today we are touching on a particularly important topic for ladies, for women, which speak to showing up in your power. And power is a variation of things. And I have a pleasure today of at least hosting one person who is a very well-versed speaker around these issues of women, issues of balance, issues of showing up in your own power. So I have a pleasure of introducing you to Lori Milner, who has a vast array of credentials. I know Lori from an entrepreneurial background. She was my customer in a point in time. And I saw a change in her where she just came out in her power. And she was a speaker, public speaker. She's an author to a book called Of Sayings and Special Talks from Women who talk about different topics about the experience in a corporate environment. Lori, welcome to She Unleashed, and you are the most important guest for today because you're talking about a very good topic, which is about showing up in power. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Pamza. And I must just say, it's an absolute honor to be here. And, you know, as you mentioned, we've known each other for a very long time. And when I think about someone who stands in their power, and truly, you are an absolute inspiration. So it's an honor to be here.
That's amazing, Lori. I know you are such a generous soul with all the compliments, but thank you about that. Lori, what is this thing about showing up in power? What do you make of it? And what is the definition of power for you?
So for me, you know, there's the saying that says knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, knowledge of self is what the real personal power is.
Mm-hmm.
It's about how well do you know yourself? Are you taking the time? And I think the basis of, okay, yes, what does that mean to get to know yourself? The basis of that is about choosing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's about saying, you know, you've got to be the reason why. You've got to say, okay, because often what we do is when we start to think of power, we think of, and it's called an external locus of control. You know, we think about, well, this job's going to give me power.
Yep.
This specific bank account, this, you know, fill in the blank what it is to you. This car is going to give me power, this position. But if we are not on an intrinsic level, if we haven't internalized and really have that self-belief and that inherent self-trust, you could get to that position, but that's when we still feel, that's why imposter syndrome is real. Because if you haven't internalized it, you're going to get there and go, but they're going to figure me out. And so how do you start to take grasp of this personal power? It's about, okay, instead of putting my self-worth on things external to me, quite honestly, things I don't have control over, how can I flip that and start developing this internal locus of control, meaning that I am responsible, you know, it's based on things that I have control over. And so I have a model in terms of how do you start to create this personal power? And feel free to stop me at any point. But we need a system, you know, otherwise it becomes kind of a fluffy concept. And, you know, we start thinking, well, should I be saying positive affirmations? And it's actually, you know, we'll get to that a little bit later. But we need a system. You need a system to start creating it. And at the bottom, if you imagine a pyramid, the first layer is our physical power, then emotional, mental, and our spiritual power. And let me unpack it. And why I'm starting with physical is, number one, physically, our health. That is, if we do not have that, there's no power happening anywhere. But what we need to start doing is, what are we doing to create a system in terms of, number one, self-care? Are we putting ourselves on our, and I hate the word to-do list, but are we putting ourselves in our calendar? Are we showing up to those slots? And why? If you just take something so small, if I said to you, right, do you think you could find 15 minutes a day? If you checked emails less, check the socials left, because and the reason I ask this question is most of us go, I don't have time. I would love to fit in something for me, but I don't have the time. But realistically, we all can find 15 minutes a day. So if you now started waking up 20 minutes earlier, 15 minutes earlier, and you said, okay, tomorrow morning, I'm going to set my alarm for 6:30 and I'm going to, just for 15 minutes, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to write. I'm going to journal. I'm going to whatever it is. And then when you wake up, and instead of hitting snooze, because that's often the default of what we do, is we're well,
Absolutely.
and we're disappointed with ourselves. And then what happens is that we begin this downward spiral, and we are disappointed. And why that starts to have this dominoes effect is that you broke the agreement with yourself.
Yeah.
And it may just feel like, oh, well, I'll do it tomorrow. But if we are not in a system of showing up to ourselves, of keeping that appointment with ourselves, what starts to happen? So when you do start to do that, is you creating a system to show, oh, but I'm showing up to myself. I'm building self-trust.
Yeah.
I know if I set my alarm tomorrow and I wake up at that time and I do what I said I was going to do, we create a micro win. So it's a, imagine a Lego brick of a big goal that you want to do. So in terms of building your physical power, create a ritual that you are setting up for yourself. And you can start with 15 minutes. If you can do more, great. But why that's really important is now I've woken up, I've done my 15-minute walk, I did my Zumba class on my phone. Now I'm acknowledging that win. So now I'm going, wow, Laurie, well done. And because why that's important to do is, number one, that's how you build a habit, is that when you release dopamine at the right time, it starts to become a habit. But we're starting to train ourselves in acknowledging small wins along the way. Because often what we do is we'll say, well, only when I get the big position, then I'll be there. Only when I reach this number. But what about in between? And so if you can start building up a system where you are acknowledging yourself, and in the process, you're teaching yourself self-praise. Yeah. Well done. I'm proud of you. Jeez. And what you start to do, and where power comes into this, is you're creating a system for daily, it's a system to build confidence every day. It's a system to build resilience. Because what happens, and the silly story, but it paints the picture nicely. I pre-lockdown, I always used to train at 5. I had to be in the gym at 5:00. Yes. And the one night, my daughter was quite young at the time. My kids are now 6 and 8, so I'm a mommy as well. But at the time, my little one was about, 2 or 3, and she'd been up the whole night, and I didn't have really good sleep. My alarm went off, and I knew that someone was waiting for me there, and I got up and I went. And I got through the session actually way more stronger than I thought I was going to. Wow. And thought, geez, okay, wow, well done. And why it's more, what I was doing is I was training myself how to build mental strength. Because what happened a few weeks later is I had the same broken sleep, but I had to show up for a really big conference, and I had to deliver a 90-minute talk. Wow. And if I hadn't had those almost practice sessions of going, okay, that's not perfect. I'm not feeling my best, but you know what? I can do this. I've shown myself, and I'm going to nail this. Wow. And if you don't have almost those daily, and they seem insignificant, but if you're not creating that training ground for yourself, very easily my self-talk would have been, oh, but I'm not feeling great, and I didn't sleep well, and I'm just not going to do my best. And I could have gotten myself into this whole anxious spiral. But that's why. So when we start on your something physical, something that you can do to look after yourself from a sleep, get to bed earlier. And, so that's from something that you can do to train that side. But then all the rest, it's the stuff we know that we don't always do. Are we drinking enough water? Are we getting that extra hour of sleep? What are we doing to build our power physically? Because when you're coming from a base where you feel strong, then you can move on. And then that would take us into our emotional power. And what do I mean by that? Think back to a situation where you made a complete blunder. You sent a mail out of anger, you copied the wrong people, there were spelling mistakes, you said something you didn't mean to. And if you look back to that situation, it's often because your state wasn't optimal. You were angry, you were tired. There's a great acronym called Halt, which is hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And generally when we're sitting in one of those states, that is when we should not be taking action. Fix whatever it is first. And so why I say build your emotional power, it's about, number one, naming the emotion. Number one is pause. So how do you develop emotional power? pause. When you can feel yourself getting frustrated, getting anxious, getting tired, getting angry. Number one, our body wisdom is phenomenal. And so, some people, I know when I get upset, my throat starts to close. Some people feel it in their stomach. Some people's, your fists clench. So where in your body can you start to feel that? And then name it. I'm really starting to, geez, I can feel myself getting anxious. I can feel myself getting like this. And when you name the emotion, it loses the power that it has over you. And so there's a great book called Getting to Yes by William Ury. He says we can either identify the emotion or get identified, which means you are now so angry, you've lost your temper, you've sent that mail. And often it's that pause about going, right, even if you receive something that a snotty mail or something, write the response, but then save it, put it in drafts, come back to it in the morning, because that's how you sabotage yourself. Is you think, well, if I don't respond, I'm giving away my power.
Yeah.
But ironically, is when you can slow down the decision making in those really high stress situations, that is when you take your power. And so it's about just slowing it down. Okay, what am I feeling? Do I need a break? And then come back to it. Then we start to move into our mental power. And that is really, if you imagine, your phone being the operating, you imagine your phone's operating system. You have no idea exactly what it works, but you just want your phone to work and upgrade and do what it needs to do. Our operating system runs on our thoughts, our beliefs, and the stories we tell ourselves. Now, what's brilliant with our phones is that you'll get that message going, we're going to be doing an upgrade tonight, at midnight, and you kind of just click yes, and it does its thing. We have a manual function for that. We have to stop and go, does my system need an upgrade? And what I mean by that is, are we still sitting on beliefs we made 5 years ago, thoughts that we've been, and often what happens is we think the same repetitive thoughts. So if we stuck in a pattern of, you're not good enough, this is never going to happen, and we replaying those thoughts every day, that is our operating system. But really the biggest thing about our power is, what is your story? What is the story you're telling yourself? Is that story, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm an introvert, I'm bad with technology, I should have done this in my 20s? Because, your mind's a supercomputer and it's eavesdropping all the time. And so it's about saying, right, imagine you're a master coder. We've got to start to upgrade the software, because that is going to stop you from showing up. If you've told yourself a story, I'm a shocking public speaker, when that role or opportunity comes along, you're going to go, oh, no, I don't do that.
Yeah.
So you're not going to show up for those things. And so you're holding yourself back. And so how do you gain, and that's a tricky one, because, the two tools here in terms of how do you take ownership of your mental power. Number one is you want to become aware of your thoughts. So it really is tuning into that mental chatter, because that mental chatter is with you when you wake up in the morning, throughout the day, when you go to bed at night. You've got to be aware of it and then begin to interrupt it if it's not serving you. So if you're going into a daunting or, courageous conversation, a presentation, something, and you're aware of a thought going, I don't know, this is, you're never going to do this, or, something destructive, which often tends to happen, something self-critical, interrupt the thought, and you've got to interrupt the pattern. So it would be, where's the proof? Where's the proof? Or what you do is you have a default thought ready. And so as soon as you can find your mind going there, you need to send it to a place that's more positive. And I'm not saying lie to yourself, but it's about going, this thought is not serving me, and this is not allowing me to step into my power. This one is opening the door for me to do that. And then the second tool that we can use is think about the concept of your future self. So if I asked you, Pumza, are you the same person you were 5 years ago?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Okay. But now if we project forward 5 years, equally, we're not going to be the same person. So if you are feeling right now, I'm feeling stuck, I know I'm capable of more, I know I can achieve more, I know I'm holding myself back, say, okay, let's project 5 years, 3 years even. Who is the Pumza of 3 years' time? How does she step out into the world? What is, what are her thoughts? How is she feeling? How does she address a situation? How does she deal with stress? What is she doing? What is the job? You can go down, and the clearer that you can be about what you want that future picture to be, number one, it's going to give you that intrinsic motivation, because you are striving towards you. You're not doing it for anybody else. You're not saying I'm doing it for this person, or, this is for me. And then when you've got that picture, you're going to start to step into your power that is congruent with her. So maybe the me of today is terrified of public speaking, but I know that she needs that in order to step up to where she needs to be. So I've got to make sure that I'm not being, because you could say, well, I'm being authentic to me now. But if we keep being authentic to almost that fear in ourselves, we're never going to grow into the person we want to become. So do it for her, put your hand up. And the more we do it, and it's just about exposure.
Yeah.
The more we do it, the more, you're a phenomenal speaker. I'm sure when you went to your first podcast interview, you also had all kinds of self-doubt, and now you kind of just step into it and it's natural. But if I said to you,
Laurie,
imagine telling yourself of 10 years ago, this is where you are today, you'd go, oh no.
Tell me, what are the triggers for most women for you? Because that story of I can't do it normally persists for a long time. And sometimes people do not realize that it's being stuck, and it actually is something that can be solved. So in most of the mentorship discussions, I meet a lot of women who are really still not operating in the power. You can see the talent, you can see everything. But to actually make that step, what have you found have been, the most positive triggers for people to actually, step into their power?
I think you almost have to take a step back and go, okay, what are the behaviors that are holding me back? So what are my patterns? For argument's sake, it could be if there's an opportunity to do a presentation. What is your default? Is your default to go, or, what if it's not perfect? And what if I'm judged? And what if I mess it up? So it's just safer not to do it. So is your pattern, when an opportunity comes up, I'm scared I'm not going to be perfect, therefore I step back and I let the fear win. Is that the pattern in other areas of your life as well? Okay, so now say to yourself, right, the next time that opportunity comes along, I'm going to, whether I think I'm qualified or not, whether I'm not, whether I'm going to convince myself of it or not, take the opportunity. I'm going to put myself out there and I'm going to go for it. So I think you've got to start, I'm trying to remember the author of the book, but what got you here is not going to get you there. If you keep doing the same behaviors, but you're still feeling in that stuck place, it's saying, what is one small thing I can do that is going to move me out of it? What is one small thing I can do that I'm going to feel powerful? That's why I say it's something as simple as creating an exercise routine for yourself, where it's a dedicated slot. You show up, you do it, you're proving to yourself, I can trust myself. Because what you're doing, you want to create evidence that you are the kind of person who can do this. So when I say, you know what, what do you value? Do you value health? Do you value time with your family? Do you value having energy for things that matter to you? So what are the values? What are your non-negotiables? And then what are the behaviors that are going to be congruent with that? So you could say, right, I want to be a healthy person. Healthy people do this. If you want to become a writer, for argument's sake, maybe there's someone who's saying, you know what, I've got this book in me. I've had it for ages. I've got this writing talent. I would love to do more for my firm, but I'm not sure. I just can't get around to starting. Okay, chunk it down, because I think often, and maybe this is coming back to your question, is I think when we want to do something, we place too much emphasis on the perceived outcome. What is this going to mean for me? So what should just be a presentation which is an opportunity to show your value, becomes to you mentally, if I mess this up, I'm going to sabotage my career. And we start to get, but we place way too much focus on what it really is. We always start to think, if, okay, but what if this goes really well? What if this doesn't go really well? And so you start, and then you've gotten yourself into such a spin. You now procrastinate, you put it down. I'll come back to it later. I'm not going to do that course. So what can you do? Chunk it down. Okay, I want to start writing. Can you find 30 minutes in a day, in a week, start 15 minutes a day. And all I'm going to do is write. It doesn't matter what you do in the time. So you can't go in there going, I'm going to get 2 pages done in this time. You have to focus on the process. You have to get yourself into the system. So we rise, James Clear said, we rise to the level of our goals and we fall to the level of our systems. So you may have these big lofty goals. What is your system to make it happen? Because the system that the results you've got now is on par with your system that you've created. So if you are feeling in a space of overwhelm, procrastination, distraction, that's the system you've created. So if you're sitting down and you haven't mapped out your calendar, you haven't gone, this is what I'm doing, this is when I'm doing it. And of course, things can change. But if you haven't taken ownership of when you're going to do things and actually map out and block time for yourself for the things that matter, you're never going to get to it. You're never going to feel like you've got harmony, balance in your life. So, but if you said, right, I'm going to create a system. So maybe someone's in sales and they're going, I don't know why, I'm not meeting my targets. I'm not doing this. Okay, what's your system? When are you calling clients? You should be able to look at their diary and see Monday to Thursday, 9 to 11 sales calls. You should be able to look at someone's diary and see when, what, how. If you've got a goal, because if it's not in the calendar and there's no time dedicated to it, it's never going to come to fruition and you're going to feel frustrated. And sometimes stepping into your power is as simple as going back to the basics and taking power back over your diary and not feeling guilty and not feeling bad. And if you want to schedule 4:30 on a Wednesday to go and do a boxing class or to go and paint a picture or go for a ride or study something that's meaningful to you, there's, the only person stopping you is you. And so that's when we start to feel powerless. Is when we're not.
I think what you said when we started was actually the fundamental part of it, that it's like a triangle and they are all interconnected, because I think in the discussion you mentioned the mental aspects. What are you telling yourself? What are the thoughts that you are, reinforcing? And also that when you are, taking care of your body, you appear stronger. You can make bold decisions. When you're feeling good, you can actually make those bold decisions, and you have the confidence and you have all of that. You also mentioned the emotional aspect, that how are you aware of your emotions? Firstly, can you name them? And when you name them, how do you get yourself out of the states into the more powerful states that you have? Laurie, it is for someone who has really gone down the path of self-development and really getting to a point of discovery and all of those things. What do I tell a woman that is still struggling in a web of emotions? I don't know which emotions are mine. I don't have the discipline to go to the gym. I don't have all of those things. It seems like it's a process, and it must be an intentional process of wanting to grow and wanting to be in your power. How did you web your way through this? If you look back and say the Laurie of 10 years, what was the first step that you had to undertake and follow the process? Because I see you mentioning a lot of reading that you have to do. You've had to do, and you're mentioning a lot of books that you had to go on a self-discovery path, because you started with a powerful statement of saying it's knowledge of self. How did Laurie get to that knowledge of self?
So that is definitely it's not overnight, and it's just about putting in the work. I think for me, I've always had a huge passion for personal growth, for self-development. My late dad introduced me to all of this. I mean, when I was 17, I'm 40 in August. I know I don't look it.
I remember you're very serious. You're still young.
Yeah.
About 10 years ago, you were very serious already. Yes.
Right. So, and I think for me, it's just about, it's putting in the work, and it's about trying to see, okay. And I think it's starting small. Okay. I want to, and I you know what it was? Because when I started this business in 2011, and it was about this burning passion to say how it was about women, working women. Yep. How it was that, for me, it was burning my own itch. How do they do it all? How do these amazing women, how do they have the perfect life and the perfect family, and they're these mothers and they're these things? And I was just going, I need some of that. Because I wasn't a mom yet, but I was recently married and, really wanting to do amazing things in my career. And it was, like any entrepreneur, you want to solve your own problem. Yep. And that, and the journey was, I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I just knew begin. I had no idea 10 steps forward, but I knew I'm just going to take step one and see what happens. And I didn't place, I think I was almost, there was a naivety there, but it was around, okay, I just want to see this. And I was bold, and I phoned, I didn't mind, judging. I mean, I called you at some point to say, can I interview you for the book? And I reached out to people. And I think because, you know what it is? I think when you can start to turn your lens to contribution. So when you move it off self, around being perfect, around perfection, and you shift it to contribution. So it wasn't about, I don't know what this event, I started out running events before I started getting into the corporate training side. And it was, how can I create something amazing for other people? It wasn't, how am I going to come across looking perfect? It didn't matter if it wasn't perfect. It was, and which is a big thing, because I think perfection and control has been my big lessons. But something that I just want to tie the loop on, which has helped me incredibly in the last, I'd say 3 years, is the top of the triangle, which is about, when I say spiritual power. And what I mean by that, please, it's got nothing to do with religion. It's why that's really important in terms of tying the loop in owning our power, is that I think as women, and especially now dealing with COVID and the situation and the challenges that we are, there's this really deep need for control. Yeah, we want to control our worlds. We want to take control of everything with all the uncertainty. I want to map every aspect of my day, and I want to be in charge of that. And when that is taken away from us, we are left feeling incredibly overwhelmed. And so I started doing, I've been meditating for a long time, but I was learning one-on-one with a phenomenal meditation teacher. Okay. And I remember when I arrived in my first lesson with her, I sat down and I was, I'm A-type, but I was highly A-type then. There's a blog coming out about it soon. Sit down and going, Pats, I want to learn this, and I want to know more, and basically give me the bullet point and the Excel spreadsheet for meditation. And I remember she said to me, honey, show up to the mat, and whatever shows up, that's what you show up to. Wow. And I just didn't understand that. And but that wasn't enough for me. I wanted, I needed this control. And what I've learned in my journey over the last 3 years is that when you have faith, it doesn't matter what you call it. If you call it God, if you call it the universe, if you call it a higher power, whatever it means to you, it gives you, when times are really tough and challenging and you feel like you have no power, it gives you this inherent sense that, okay, but the universe has got my back. Okay, I know that this is not what I asked for, but I believe that it's happening for me. It's not happening to me. And somewhere I've got to find the lesson in this. And why that's so important now is when we're talking about our power, is that if you think about maybe big life decisions, and something that happened. And at the time, it was the worst thing that ever happened. It could have been relationship focused. It could have been a job focused. It could have been, I never got this house that I was, that I wanted, whatever it is. But with hindsight, you could look back. And with hindsight, you could go, thank goodness that didn't happen, because this opportunity came and that showed up for me. But right now, we have no hindsight. We are the dot. Do you know what I mean? We have no way of being able to project and see the bigger picture now.
You mentioned... Sorry, Laurie.
So when you put that trust, you just have to sense that, okay, this belongs. Okay, I don't know why, but I know that I'm not alone. And I know that this is happening. And even though I feel like I've got no control, there is power in letting go of control.
You said something very powerful when you started off with this part, where you said you move away from self, but you also you move into contribution. It's not about how I will show up as Laurie. It's about what can I contribute to the world. And it's also, and some people do not, take you seriously when you say start already, because if there's a seed, and it's a faith thing, like what you're saying, it's a faith thing. You have something that is sown into your spirit to, you always directed to say, you should be speaking to women, you should be doing this. And you don't know the how. And the secret is in the starting, because in the starting, in you calling Pumza, you found another person who was willing, and somehow these things weave in together to give you something that you never thought. I mean, you never thought that you could deliver a book that was as powerful as it was. I mean, I was at the launch, and it was so surreal to see all of those women. I'm sure when you started, you had no idea that it could become something that powerful.
Absolutely not. And I think I just want to close the loop on the question you asked about if people are feeling stuck, what can they do? And in fact, you just answered the question. And it really is starting. And that means what's the first Lego brick? What is the first thing I can do? And maybe it's as simple as I'm going to get the telephone number. I'm going to get an application form to enroll for this course. I'm just going to watch a TED talk every day to inspire myself. What is it reading a book? What is the thing that you can do? And you can find interesting ways to start, if you are not filling your own cup. And I think that's the basis of what power is that if we are running on empty, and if we are not making time for ourselves, and if we are not putting in something that it's daily acts of kindness. And kindness isn't about going to the spa. It's about, I'm going to go and, I'm going to read a nice book today. Yep. I'm going to take a break and I'm going to switch off at 5 o'clock and I'm going to go and do this. I'm going to be, I don't know if, and I think the other thing, is about, we've got this carrot and stick approach in terms of motivating ourselves. If I work really hard this week, then I'm going to take a weekend for myself. But what happens if you couldn't get to what you wanted to because life happened, because we had to homeschool? Are you just not going to give yourself the weekend? What are you building in to look forward to? It's that internal ignition. What are you doing to fuel yourself? That's when power starts to come.
You did a TED talk, Laurie, and I was awesomely proud. And I rewatch and look at the Laurie now. Look at the Laurie 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I'm like, I'm amazed at just how this woman just evolved. What are the powerful talks Laurie had to give herself to get to that stage? Actually saying, let's just take it and say it's a project. It was the TED talk. What were the playing factors in her head that just got her up to that stage and say, I can do this?
You know what's so interesting, and I'm so happy and I'm proud to share the story, because what I always say about when you watch that talk is that if you watch it, it's 14 minutes of polish, but it took 8 weeks and it took 35 drafts to get to that point.
Wow.
And I remember that in the beginning, it had been on my bucket list for years to do a TED talk. I was so happy when it came through. But then I started freaking myself out, because as a public speaker, it's a really big deal. And you think, well, Brené Brown made her career overnight, and Simon Sinek made his career overnight, and they did this talk, and I started freaking myself out, and that I started to become terrified of this talk.
Mm-hmm.
And I got so anxious about it. And my husband said to me, he said, what if one of your clients said, could you just do a 15-minute talk on micro wins? What would you say? I'd say, yeah, it's fine. I'd do it. He goes, it's the same thing. I said, this is not the same thing. This is TEDx. And do you know what this means? He goes, it's just a talk. And I was so cross with him but he was so right. I had placed so much emphasis. I basically put the future of my world on a 14-minute talk.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized and why it was such a valuable experience for me is the value was in the process.
Mm-hmm.
The value is that every time I had to go back to the drawing board, and I had a coach who was phenomenal. And, at one point he said, start again. It's not enough of you. Keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And he from such a good place that he believed in me to the point where he pulled out the best of me.
Wow.
And the journey was the process. I grew because of that. If I had gone from write a talk, get it approved, get on the stage,
mm-hmm.
I would not have grown.
Mm-hmm.
There would be no growth, and I would not have been any better for the experience. And so the hardship and the struggle of it, there's a great quote, and it's not mine, it's Brendan Burchard's, who says, honor the struggle.
Mm-hmm.
The part about keep going, and I'm questioning myself, and am I good enough, and should I be here, and why am I not there yet?
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to get, why isn't this done? But the process is the growth, and it's like every day, if we only focused on the big goal, because then what? If I did the talk and it was amazing, but life carries on. Everyone said, wow, it was really great, but nothing's going to change.
Mm-hmm.
You're not suddenly going to start getting 6-figure book deals. Life carries on, and it's got to be, this was an experience in my toolkit, and I chose to grow out of it. And so I think, again, have goals. Goals are amazing because it's a place to come from,
Mm-hmm.
but don't make it the be all and end all.
Mm-hmm.
Make the growth, make the day. If you're not loving the day to day, then then you're in the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're hating the day to day only to get to but I'm working towards that thing to make me happy.
Mm-hmm.
Not every part of every day is going to be amazing, but that's where the joy is. That's where the growth is.
Mm-hmm. You keep on talking and referring to the process. It's a process. Everything is a process. And I think there is absolutely this hunger with most women, and most doors opening for women. And there's this hunger to almost be powerful overnight. Mm-hmm. And an expectation that because you got the job, because you got the title, you almost have to appear powerfully, naturally. And we never give us the patience of actually going through the process. I like that you keep on referring to the process. Tell me, in your training, because you meet a lot of women through the corporate training, in which instances are women appearing powerless, still at the stage with all the access to the platforms that they can get? What do you think is the hindrance to women appearing powerfully?
I think it starts before they walk in the room. I think it begins with your self-talk. I think if you are not, and again, how do you define power? Are you defining power that you should be able to walk in and command the room? Are you defining, for me, power is that our uniqueness is the way that we lead, that we lead in a different way. We have our own style. You want people not to follow you because you are, quote unquote, the leader, but because they honor you, they respect you, they will walk the front lines for you. You are showing up for them. That's what leadership is, even if it means leading from behind. Often an amazing leader is a guide. If you think about, there's an article coming out next week that I was writing around, we sometimes as women leaders, not even necessarily women, but as leaders need to reframe. And sometimes our role is moving from manager, leader to guide. And what are we doing to mentor, to take other people through their personal journey? But I don't want to digress from your question. And your question is, what stops women? And I think number one is around self-talk. I think there's almost this feeling of I don't deserve to be here. I think there's a large amount of imposter syndrome, which is normal, and we all feel like that.
Yeah.
And I think, is it an inherent lack of belief in yourself? Is it this feeling like, and I think it's just about, you need to, having the self-belief it's the confidence that I have the ability to figure things out.
Yeah.
Maybe and it's having the growth mindset. A growth mindset is the belief that if I want to change careers and become a coder, I know that I have the potential and the capability to develop the tools I need to move into that role. Versus a fixed mindset is going, I'm born this way. This is what I've got. I will never be good at speaking. I will never be good with numbers. I will never be good at, all the stuff we tell ourselves. And so it's what is that thought process? Are you having a bigger vision for yourself? Are you having and it's not even about power. For me, is coming in a different way. And I think it's not only about showing up in a role point of view, but I think if you have power over how you're feeling, power over, I talk about a to feel list. How do you want to feel at the end of each day? That contentment, that energize, that gratitude. You don't want to go through your days doing the motions, got to do this, go, and you're exhausted. If you can almost allow yourself to say, okay, what does working hard mean? What constitutes a great, always say, what is an amazing average day like for you? An amazing average day, because not every day is going to be, the promotion and you got to do this and this huge presentation. If you can master an amazing average day, you're doing really well. And that means making sure that you are showing up in the calendar. You are putting yourself in there. You are making time for the family. You being conscious about the energy you want to bring to the room. And I also think maybe what's stopping us from being a powerful leader is intention. And it can be as simple as, if you're going into a meeting with your team, it could be saying, okay, what is the energy I want to bring into this meeting today? What is the skill I want to contribute in this board meeting today? What is the one thing? What is the value I want to bring? And consciously set your intention. And then set reminders throughout the day. Maybe you have to set an alarm. I mean, what I do is before every single meeting, I set an alarm 10 minutes before. And it's not to remind me of the meeting. It's because it triggers me to think about how I want to walk into that space. Okay, I've got this kind of a meeting. I'm engaging with these kind of people. What is important? What do I want them to know? What do I want them to think? What do I want them to do? How do I want to come across? And it's not about manipulation. It is all about intention. And maybe we're not being intentional enough about how we want to show up.
It's almost like taking your position of power is almost like a reset. It's like you have to be conscious. And if I look at the three pillars that you were talking about, it's almost like you have to be conscious and say, I will reset. How am I doing from a physical perspective? Where have I spent the time? How am I doing from an emotional perspective? And how am I appearing from a mental perspective? It's almost like a conscious reset you have to do for you to appear then from a sort of a balanced kind of, perspective. If you're walking into that room, you can't be walking from one meeting directly into the next and think you will appear powerfully, which is powerful.
So I think it's, that's why I always say, try have a 15-minute buffer between meetings. Don't just go from one to the next. But also, I think you can tell yourself a great story. You can be aware of your emotions. You can be aware of everything. But the bottom line of what it comes down to is action. What you can't, a positive attitude's not enough to step into your power. What are the actions that you're taking? And it doesn't matter how small the steps are, but are you moving forward? Are you improving 1% a day? What are you doing that you can go, okay, I did better than last week? Are you measuring yourself? So you could have have an accountability partner, have someone, even if it's a coach, a friend, a colleague, someone you trust, that you could say to each other at the beginning of every week, okay, these are my goals for the week. And you check in on a Friday, and it's just having that person to go, did you do this thing? And that is going to, number one, we do our best when we know other people are watching. But that accountability, it's human nature. You know, as motivated as we want to be, when we have an accountability partner and someone who's got our back, not to criticize us, it's going to move you into action. So what is the system you're setting up? Are you monitoring your own feedback? Are you monitoring your progress? At the end of each day, you could say, how, you know, what are the things important to you? So maybe, is it about quality time with my kids? Is it about number of calls, whatever it is? And you could say, on a scale of 1 to 10, was I kind to myself today? On a scale of 1 to 10, did I do X? And so you've got to give yourself a rating out of 10. And eventually, after giving yourself 4s and 5s, you're going to get fed up with yourself and you're going to go, no, today I'm going to write down an 8. And so again, it's, what are the metrics that you are putting in place? What's the system to help you move forward? And it's small wins over time. But incrementally, you will start, it's micro bravery. You know, you take one step, you take one step, you take one step. You're going to look back and go, wow, I did that.
Contrast the female versus the male type of power for me, because I like how you define power for me today, because it was mostly, it's not about the, you know, aggressive kind of demeanor and all of those things. It was just saying, if I know myself, then it makes it easier for me to move from a premise of power. And also, if I know I've addressed the 3 pillars, you know, I have better chances of appearing in any kind of context powerfully. So why I'm asking you to contrast the male versus the female is that there's been a perception of what power looks like and how it is experienced. How do we define the two? Because I think I like what the conversation was all about, because even in the context of today, where you're saying that you are not in control, we are in a phase where there's no control, and it's sort of like a sort of a nurturing kind of power that we need to start showing, you know, subordinates at work. The power is not going to be about rushing them about deadlines now. It's going to be about how do you help them to transition whatever they're going through as well, both personally.
Absolutely. And I think that's spot on, because I think it's almost leveled the playing fields when you talk about power now, because it doesn't matter if you are a male boss, it doesn't matter if you are a female boss. What is going to set you apart now is your emotional intelligence and your ability to lead with empathy and your ability to lead with care. And it's that very, very fine line between, as a leader, having to go, okay, we've got to make up for lost time. You know, last year we suffered losses financially, economically. Okay, so yes, there's not really the thing to say, okay, we're going to play at low capacity. We've got to be at full capacity. But I've got to make sure that I'm managing my team from a place of empathy. I've got to make sure that I'm helping my team prioritize. Because what I found a lot is that's why I mentioned guide, is that the role is changing slightly. Is that, you know, and I think that, and I think as women, it's an incredible strength, because it almost comes naturally. But that for me levels the playing field, because that is what's going to make a powerful leader. Someone who's got a manager that they can look up to, that goes, wow, you know, they don't just care about the thing and it's things you can do. Are you checking in with your team? For, you know, you can't do it every single meeting, but on a Monday, guys, how was the weekend? Check in with a word. Check in. I have a client who does a meeting, and she checks in. Everyone has to give a color. Check in with a color. I'm feeling a bit like this. I'm feeling a bit blue. I'm red today. This is why. And I see you as a human. I see you as a human. I see you as a person. I value you. Okay. And also now I know where you're at. Because if I've noticed that someone is not performing as they normally do, if I've noticed someone is having a lot more interpersonal conflict than is in character for them, I've got to know why. Oh, okay, they're dealing with this. There's a sick relative. They've had, you know, all kinds of extra stresses are happening now. How do I hold space from a human level, but then help them step into their power? And the way that you can do that is even just as simple as helping them prioritize. I think in terms of, and that's a powerful thing to do. I think in times of overwhelm and challenge and stress, the seemingly obvious stuff does not become obvious. And common sense isn't always common practice. So can you help, whether it's one-on-one meetings as a team, guys, this is what we're focusing on this week. These are my priorities for the week. Where are you at? Okay. Why do you feel that's a priority? Okay. Can you steer them into the right place? But you're doing it from a place of building them up, not knocking them down.
Absolutely.
Again, not moving into a micro. And the thing about control is that don't let it come. There's healthy forms of control. A healthy form of control is structuring your day, structuring your calendar. I'm going to make sure that I am being proactive in when I'm doing things. I'm not just, is someone's calendar a stream of white space and all they're doing is just reacting to their inbox? When are you going to do this? I don't know when I can fit it in. So can you help them structure? Can you help them prioritize? Can you help them not, micromanaging is a destructive way to find control because you go, well, let me just do it myself because no one's going to do it as well as me. But you're going to start to completely demotivate your team. So that's not a strategy for control. And it's focusing on the what. Don't, focus on the what and the why. Let them figure out the how. And so these are strategies in terms of you can be incredibly powerful. It's not this bold, I'm coming in and I'm shouting orders. That's powerful because you are leading in a way that people will never forget how you treated them now, and you will gain respect and trust.
And what you're saying is so powerful because it's like there's a global shift on what energy the world wants to see as power. Because there's a lot more focus around inclusion. And inclusion means the taking on some of the team leaders or team players that we in the past viewed as, oh, this one is going to slow down the team. But we're saying we need to include everyone else. So if it's a female in your context, it means you have to have that, power that is different, that is going to now be all encompassing and include people. I mean, there's a whole lot of a view towards the environment. All those are female energies. And it's like a shift that is saying the world is actually ready to see a different type of power and not necessarily what we viewed in the past as what was important. Which is really, 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 I mean, even in the recovery stage, we're going to need exactly what you're saying, the empathetic leader that still will meet the objectives of the organization, but they need to show up in a different way. Meaning that women need to rise up to this because it's what is up, like it's natural for women to play that role. Which is,
and it's not, and I think, it's just reframing what we think we need to be and stepping into our own power of who we are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Laurie, you do a lot of things. You write, you train, you are a speaker. If anyone is looking for you, where do they find you? And what will Laurie's plan be in the next coming 3 months or so?